Today's victim is a 4206 dual action AC fuel pump, 55 to 57 Fords and Thunderbirds. This pump actually will fit up to 59, so 55 to 59. They're all basically the same thing with there's a couple of differences, a couple of notable things. These tubes, in order for it to fit on a 59 T-Bird, it would have these little bumps right in the center of that. I don't have one handy, but it's just a silly difference. Also, this bottom casting, if you were to take this off and put a cover on it, that would make it still fit the same 55 to 59 Fords and Thunderbirds, but it wouldn't be correct for certain ones. So we're going to go through it, freshen it up. This one here came out of our core pile, rebuilt by a authorized Ford rebuilder. I don't know who the dude was, but in any event, first thing you want to do is clamp it in the vise. Hopefully you have a vise handy. It makes it a lot easier. Clamp it by one of these ears. You're going to take out, there's 8 screws here, you want to take out 7 of them. Hold on the last one. The reason being is there's a pretty heavy spring underneath here, and if you just take this thing off without holding the top of it, it sticks for a second and then it lets go and sends it to the moon. So you can, like I said, remove 7 of them. Here's the last one. As you can see, it's, oh, I missed one. As you can see, it's stuck down there. Sometimes a few taps one side or the other on this tower, just nice and easy. If it doesn't, grab your putty knife, hold on to that casting, put the putty knife in between the two. This one was stuck pretty good. This is what I see in a lot of pumps. There's supposed to be 2 valves here. Both of these have fallen out. One of them already did fall out. The other one's loose. It just pops right out. In order to get these valves out, if they're stuck in there, just take your screwdriver, just pry the thing out. The other side will have it looking like that. Put your screwdriver in the center of it, just pop it out. This is that spring I was talking about. The spring seat. Now, a lot of these pumps that have been done by a rebuilder, I can tell you what, this thing has been, this was done sometime in the 50s, and you can tell that by the fact that it's a multi-layer diaphragm. As I can get it out of here. And a lot of them will change the link in the center that holds the vacuum on there. Usually it's two pieces, two individual pieces that hook onto this, and they change it to a single one with a key slot in the center. And in that case, you just turn it and lift it out. There's the key slot I was talking about. If you can't turn it one way or the other, then you'd have to push the diaphragm down, tip it back, and try to scoot that pull rod off of, unhook it off of the links. These valves, all of these valves have been falling out. And the seal, just pry it out. Not much more you can do with this. Everything's out. Sometimes you'll find a gasket like this one. Make sure that comes out of there. Flip it over, and we're going to attack the fuel side. First order of business is we want to make sure that all these pieces here go back in the same exact location they were when you took it off the car. As you can see, well, I don't know if you can see it. I'll show you. Make a mark like that between the two. It's better when you're doing this style that has two separate pieces to use that as a place to mark it. That way you get this location back in and you get this one back in. This particular person did it twice, two here, but he didn't mark the location for the inlet, and they'd have to just figure that out. So it's a handy little tip just to mark it on that, right on that line. That way you don't have to make a mark up here, just on this casting and the bottom casting. Now we want to get rid of the bail, not get rid of it, get it out of the way. The bowl. This is one of the original style fuel filters. Trash. Get the bail out of the way. And down in the center there's a screw. Sometimes it's a like a clutch head. You'll take a strange, like a double D type, I call them clutch, they use them on Holly carburetors. Otherwise it's just regular screw. Remove that. You'll get a new one of those. Here's the screw that was down in the center. Later model ones will have that type of clutch head. Now you can remove all 10 of these screws altogether. Due to the, you don't have to worry about this thing popping up. There's a spring for this side is underneath the diaphragm, and it'll only go up so far. So it's time for another 10 screws. Now this is like the vacuum side. It's stuck down. Don't hammer anyway, because this casting isn't all that great. Separate the two parts. Oh yeah. These are inlet and outlet valves. I'll show you how to get those out after we get the diaphragm out of the way. Now if you're doing your pump and it's got this little tab that's on it, you look close and you'll see a staple. It's holding 5 layers of tar coated canvas together. Well, our new fuel with all this alcohol in it, or methanol, eats up those diaphragms pretty quick. So if this was to go right on a car, it wouldn't last for probably a couple miles. There's a few different ways to get this diaphragm unhooked. The way I do it seems to work every time for me. But one of them is what I do is I push that down just a little bit, take some of the spring pressure off. Tip the top back a little bit and then scoot the bottom of that pull rod back this way. And a lot of times it works, like now. It's the spring that controls the fuel pressure, the spring seat, and the diaphragm assembly. Down inside of here is another seal, and it's all destroyed. This is what happens when a pump sits around for a long time. Sits on the shelf. You get it at a swap meet. You expect that to be happening. Now the seal that's in here, a lot of people would just stick a screwdriver down there or a pry bar and pop it out. I like to come up from the bottom and just catch the edge with the screwdriver and just tap it up. Keeps this casting from breaking, or keeps you from breaking that casting. Now if you find that there's a problem with your arm, there's too much play sideways or twisting it, in order to get that out, you're going to cut this D washer right here and then drive that pin out. There's a spring down inside. There's a couple of shims on either side of this arm, and the arm will come out. If you're going to do it this way, if you're going to take the if you're having a lot of trouble getting the diaphragm assembly out, knock that pin out. Just hold a little pressure down on the diaphragm assembly, and the arm and links will slide right out. That's what your vacuum pull rod keyed into, and down inside of here is what the fuel diaphragm assembly hooked onto. And that's what went through that hook. Now we want to get these valves out very easy, seeing as how you have access to the other side of them. Put a screwdriver, put a punch down in here, a few taps will knock them right down. Don't forget to get the gasket out of there. Okay, looks like we're ready for some glass beading. We're going to take them over and clean them all up, and we're going to we'll bead blast them, all the stuff, all the castings. We'll clear coat them, and then we're going to flatten out all these surfaces. This has to be done. You can't skip this. These pumps have been together for a long time, and what happens is, right where the screw holes are, it tends to bend the casting up. And if you don't do it, you end up with a leak. So we'll be back shortly with some reassembly. Stick around at the end of this video for some strange and interesting facts and observations about these 55 to 59 Ford Thunderbird fuel pumps. Okay, we got all the parts all cleaned up. Everything's been glass beaded, clear coated. All the surfaces have been flattened out. And the vacuum section and the fuel section. One of the important parts to make sure it's flat is these two surfaces. Where these two go together, there's a rubber diaphragm that goes in between there. But if it's going to leak anywhere, it's going to leak in here. One of these two spots. You just make sure that this gets nice and flat, especially the outside of it. Now we can install some valves. Fuel section. You'll notice that there's little dents here where the other rebuilder has staked in the valves. Sometimes they'll get in the way, so what I like to do is take whatever tool I'm going to use to drive it with and knock those pieces back. You can use a little Dremel tool if you want. Ow, don't hit your finger. Once those little dimples are out of the way, put the gaskets in. It's important that you put these in, otherwise it won't seal. Press these things in. When I'm pressing these in, all I do is just listen for the sound to change, and it'll tell you when it's bottomed out. Otherwise, just look on the other side. And just to make sure they're going to stay in there, we're going to do just like the last one did, and just dimple it. Dimple the casting, 4 spots around the outside edge. It'll keep that valve from falling out. Put that diaphragm on there. Now find your reference marks. Remember, one of the spots, one of the ways I mentioned was using that as a reference point. Good and tight. Just keep in mind you got a steel screw going into an aluminum casting, a cast aluminum body, and if you go too tight you'll pull the threads right out. There's a screen that goes in here. And a gasket. You can put the bail back on. And the bowl. Just don't over tighten it. Bring it down so that you know it's sealed. You should be able to blow air in and not suck air out. You should be able to pull air out and not blow it in. That'll tell you that you got a seal around here. The bowl's sealed. The valves are opening and closing like they're supposed to. Now the vacuum, try to support it any way you can. At one time I had taken a piece of plastic, a big block of plastic, and I drilled that hole in it and I'd set this down onto it and it would support it in here, but somebody else needed it more than I did and it went away. Two gaskets. Now if you happen to forget how these go, if you look in here, this hole is deeper than this one here. Again, there's those dimples again from the previous rebuilder, but if you remember when I was taking this apart, they didn't do a very good job of staking that in. And both of these valves fell out. But we're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. Put the gaskets in, one in each hole. These valves go opposite each other. Once they're in there, now you can stake them in. Now you can test this the same way you tested the fuel side. It says right on it, in and out. In is vacuums going in. This part of the pump is producing vacuum, so this is going to suck in. You should be able to blow air in and not suck any air out. This one here is going to the intake manifold. So this is producing pressure. Suck air out, not blow it in. Sometimes it'll say wiper, but on this style casting, the closest one to the arm, which is where this will end up at, is going to go to the wipers. Always. And we got another valve to go in here yet. This is the vacuum side. Both of these valves go the same way. That one went in a little easy, so we're going to stake it. We're going to do it a different way. Seeing as how there's a little raised casting on either side of this. What I do is I take a chisel and flatten out the end of it, and that's all it takes. Now we're going to put the seal in. Always work with the, when you're assembling it, always put the fuel side on first. Make sure that bottom's out. Again, take your punch, dimple that casting. You don't want that seal coming up, because then you'll have an oily mess. Put a little dab of oil right on the center, because you don't want this pull rod to run dry. This is the new setup. Get it started in the seal. Turn it over and look down inside, and you'll be able to guide your pull rod right onto that, hook it right on. This is why you don't put the seal in first. Always work on the vacuum, work on the fuel side first, then the vacuum side. Makes it easier to see that. Make sure it's in there good. Line up the 2 holes in the diaphragm with the 2 holes in the casting, and just run it a few times to make sure that that diaphragm is hooked on. Line up your reference marks. Put 1 screw, make sure it goes through the diaphragm. Just put 1 opposite each other. Use the arm to pull it down and line it up, and just run it about, roughly about halfway down, just to get it stuck, or get it caught I should say, not stuck. Run it about halfway, then put all the other screws in and run them down halfway. Once all these screws are down halfway, you'll notice it's still loose. What you want to do is put an adjustable wrench on the end of the arm, just to give you some leverage and easier to hold it. Pull that all the way up until it stops. Now tighten the screws. Get at least 4 of them done opposite each other. Don't let go of that arm. What you're doing is you're preloading the diaphragm. By doing that, you're making it so that it'll last longer, won't stretch out, and if you tightened it up with it relaxed, a lot of times you end up with the pump producing too much pressure. It's happened. It's easy to do. It's one of the things to look for when you start up the engine and come to find out the fuel is shooting out of the top of the carburetor. Now there's a couple of reasons for that to happen too after you put on a new pump. Don't blame it on the pressure right away, but it is one thing to check. Another thing to note is that you could have picked up a little piece of dirt, and if your carburetor is flooding over, chances are that little piece of dirt is stuck in the needle and seat. Don't be so quick to blame it on the fuel pump or the kit. Or to test it, you want to test to make sure that you got a good seal here, and you're double checking this, and here you're checking the valves. Use the arm relaxed, block off the inlet, and try pulling it up, and you'll feel it. You feel it trying to pull your finger in. That'll tell you the inlet is all set. Now lift it up, put your finger over the outlet, and let it go. If it drops down real quick and you don't feel any pressure there, one of the valves might be stuck open. Usually if you're having a problem with the outlet, it's the inlet valve that's stuck, because that has to close in order for it to push air out. If you weren't getting any suction, chances are the outlet valve is stuck open and it's not closing to allow the pump to produce vacuum. So that side's all done. Flip it over and we're going to get to the vacuum side. Now you already got the one valve in. The other one doesn't get staked, it just sits there. If it sticks up a little proud, use your tool, hit it down a little bit, and you'll see the little rivet in the center pump up a little. It's alright, it's not going to hurt anything. Put the seal in. I like to just get it started and then make sure that the seal is sitting where it's supposed to. And I don't like that. So I'm going to take it back out and do it again. Much better. Now by taking that out, I'm going to have to make sure this gets staked in there real good. Usually there's 4 spots in here that allows you to do that. It won't come back up, and that seal is centered. Put a little oil on it. Again, we don't want that pull rod to run dry. And this side here does not get a gasket. It gets sealed by this, and it's allowed to go through it. Now you want to start this off straight. A little pressure on the arm. By doing that, you'll see it'll pick that diaphragm up. That's the pull rod, the link is hitting it. I turn it 90 degrees. Start turning it back as you're pushing that down, and you'll find the 2 slots, and it'll key right in. Make sure you got it. Try lifting it up. Won't go up, and pushing the arm pushes that diaphragm up. Now just line that up. Spring seat, spring. Put 2 screws in the casting, opposite each other. Get your screwdriver ready and just catch it, run it down about halfway. Catch the back one, again halfway, put in the other screws and run them down halfway, and don't tighten them up yet. Once all the screws are halfway down, just like the other side, it's still loose. Put your adjustable on the arm. Now watch, on the other side there's a little tab sticking out of the diaphragm, just like the old one that had the staple in it. Watch that, and it's right now it's sitting up at an angle like that. It's sitting up. As soon as you start pushing down on that diaphragm, on that arm, the diaphragm will come up and that tab will flatten out, and you go too far, it'll go down the other way. We want it straight across. The diaphragm goes in the neutral position, as opposed to all the way down like the fuel side. Again, get 4 of these screws caught. They're usually enough to keep the diaphragm from moving. Now, once 4 of them are done, you can release the pressure off the arm. Tighten the rest of the screws down. Now, just like I mentioned on the fuel side, you get these little 1032 machine screws going into cast aluminum. Be careful you don't over tighten it, because you'll strip it. Now, to test this and make sure it's gonna work right, move that arm up and down, put your finger over it, and you'll feel it. You feel the vacuum, and you feel the pressure. If you did everything I did and followed along, and I didn't go too fast, your pump is done. Put the gasket on, put it on the engine. I hope this helped. If you got any questions, leave them in the comment section below. If you haven't already done so, subscribe, and you'll get notified if I put any more videos up. Click the little notification bell too. And if you want to get in touch with us to buy a kit, call the store at 781-335-8860 and give the person who answers the phone part number off the flange. Could be any one of these 4 spots, and they'll be able to get you supply you with a kit. And then refer back to this video, and you'll have done it. I hope it's helped. Any questions, comments, let me know. Thanks for watching, and be safe. Now, I mentioned earlier, hang around at the end of the video, I'll show you some interesting facts about these Ford 55 to 59 Ford fuel pumps. From 55 to 57, this 4206, you could also say 4286, and this pump will fit 55 to 57. It will also fit 59 T-Bird. The difference being you'll notice these pumps are damn near identical, with the exception of the vacuum tubes. Also, besides this, well, the 59, they changed the part number to 4710. You put these 2 tubes on, they also used a different gasket. And by doing that, they had to assign a new number to it. There's also another one. There's a 4486. Looks exactly like this, only with the smooth tubes, which turns it into this. So this one could be 4206, 4286, 4486. And just to make things even more confusing, 55 to 57 T-Bird also used this one. And in place of the glass bowl, they put this cover on it. Again, all the fittings are in the same spots. It has the smooth tubes. All the parts are the same. If you order part number for this one here is 4486. No, sorry, 4406. They use the same arm, same casting. The bottom half of the casting is the same. If you were to take that screw out of there and dig up one of these sections and put it on there, you'd have a 4206. I sure hope I didn't confuse anybody with all that. But if you have anywhere from a 55 to a 59 T-Bird, you can use any of those 5 different pumps. Okay, I'm all done now.